is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Paul of Profanatica. It is so awesome to have you here. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's so great to have you here. Crux Simplex is an absolute killer beast of an album. It is absolutely relentless and definitely pulls no punches. Is For people who haven't heard the full album yet, though, do you feel like the first singles that we heard so far, "Take Up the Cross" and "The First Fall," is a good representation of this whole album, or is that just one little taste?
I think it's good. The whole thing sounds like that, meaning each song is kind of good, like stands on its own, like the ones you guys have heard.
Is this just a continuation of what we heard off of your last full-length album, "Rotting Incarnation of God," or being that you released the Pale Fuck EP after that, if this is more of a continuation of that?
It's kind of its own thing, almost. I mean, all the stuff is similar subject matter, so it could be all. You don't really have to listen to it in order, so to speak, but this one has a little more bite to it. We're proud of the way it sounds. It sounds very like ripping and crushing, if you will. Not so much bathed in reverb like some of the past recordings.
That's my review of the album, actually, that it is like your rawest album, or at least some of the rawest stuff I've heard since Profanatis de Dominatia. Forgive the
Yep.
bastardization of that.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of set out to make it like that this time.
And
Where Rotting, Incarnation of God, and I like Altar of the Virgin Whore. It's just a little bit different of an approach.
you mentioned it was your intention to make this album more raw in the very beginning. Do you usually start off the songwriting process with a preconceived vision, or is it a little more experimental at times?
It used to be more experimental, and now we have everything like at least 95% planned out. And then we always agree that if it starts taking off in another direction, but it works, we'll go with the flow.
Has Profanatica ever experimented either conceptually or musically throughout your career? Like, has there ever been a time where you set out to do something completely out of the box, or have you chose to sort of maintain a specific form or maintain a specific sound throughout your career?
Maintain. So I've kind of painted myself into a corner with these strict guidelines, but there's still a lot um, that I could do with it. So it's not there's certain areas we won't go into, but it still leaves us plenty of room. You just have to kind of be creative about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always thought that Profanatica has because there's elements of death metal, but there's also elements of black metal. It gets so chaotic sometimes. I could even see grind fans appreciating it too. So I think you kind of do go along the spectrum in that regard.
We do. It's a lot of punk people like it too because there's like a heavy punk attitude of not giving a fuck, and that's comes I think in our delivery.
Yeah,
and of course there's like flat out D beats like sprinkled along the whole new one, so people should be into that as well. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, being that Profanatica has been like an East Coast band, I mean, I do get some East Coast pride the way I am with hardcore as I do with Profanatica but there's also sort of a really cool underground black metal scene all throughout New York and the East Coast. I don't know if Profanatica was ever sort of affiliated with that, because some people say that you guys are from New York City, but some people assume you guys are from Westchester or something like that.
We were around the Westchester area, and we had, I don't know, I can't really remember the specifics, but we used to go down to Yonkers. It probably was Immolation's rehearsal studio. We would have we would do mini sets there. Like Morticia would do a couple songs, we would do a couple songs, and Immolation would do a couple.
Were you guys affiliated with sort of a scene? Because Like I've talked with bands like Mortician before, or like Suffocation with the death metal stuff, but with like great black metal bands now, especially in the modern days, with bands like Imperial Triumphant or Black Anvil, have you also maybe been kind of going along with them as well in later in your career?
I don't. I just know of those bands, the ones you just mentioned. We don't know them. I just have heard the names.
Okay.
But let's put it this way: we were friends with everybody back in the day, and we're still friends. But in terms of like booking shows or having us on the bill, it was really rare. I could tell you that we got very little support from our friends' bands back in the day in terms of, hey, let's have Profanatica on the bill too, or there was just dozens and dozens of shows happening, and we were never invited or wanted for one reason or another. But still maintaining friendships and relationships, I couldn't tell you why.
Yeah. Maybe you guys were just too brutal for even everybody else.
It's kind of funny you say that because we definitely upset the apple cart. And when those bands that we had all mentioned that we're friends with and still friends with, they were definitely freaked out when they realized at the very beginning that we weren't kidding and that we were deadly serious and it wasn't a joke.
Yeah.
Even though, yes, there was like comedy and over blaspheming and freaking people out, that was definitely a portion of it. But we were like deadly serious about our concept and the music. And I don't know, maybe we spoiled everybody's good time. The other thing is that since day one when we started, we always had this like kind of competition mindset where once it's on, it's on. And our plan, whether we could do it or not, our plan was always to just fucking annihilate the other bands that we were playing with intensity, try to be as tight as we could, outgross them out, just everything. It was kind of like a war. And I guess I grew up different than those guys because everybody was, it was more like a friendly type of camaraderie slash party. We were never involved in that.
I mean, that's really funny, actually. I mean, total apples and oranges in terms of style, but Slipknot, they did one tour where they were opening for Coal Chamber, and then like nobody wanted to open for them again because everybody would leave after them, and they would just brutalize the entire place. You guys may have had like a similar effect to it.
We could have. Now everybody's better than me on drums. I mean, there's young kids coming up that are like highly skilled. Their hands and feet are amazing. But back then it wasn't always the case.
I mean,
So I remember like the regular death metal bands from the New York, New Jersey area, the drummers always being kind of shitty. So in any band, in any kind of music, in my opinion, is if the drummer's good and the bass player's good, that's like you're kind of set up and you're already way ahead of everybody else.
absolutely, absolutely. The famous saying, "Your drummer sucks, your band sucks." It doesn't matter if you have Randy Rhoads in the band.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep. And
So there could have been, I'm not naming names, but there could have been a lot of that, if I remember correctly, going on back then.
I would definitely want to touch upon your drumming in a sec, but first with the concept that you mentioned, because you guys are very real as well. I know that like it wasn't like you were ever portraying a character or you were just this was something outside of a day job. It very much was who you are. But with what you express and kind of like as you mentioned, you've scared the crap out of people. Was that more rooted in mischief or ideology? Was there a specific reasoning or an artistic goal behind that as well?
God, it's hard to say because it kind of came natural to us. Probably more mischief coming from like a punk kind of background where we didn't give a fuck. And if somebody was upset by something, then that was just kind of like a happy accident. We would take it. It'd be like, cool. We weren't really set out to try to freak people out.
Yeah, it wasn't like you were shock rock or anything like that.
No, but one thing is like my vocals is like when I'm like pushing ultra hard, that's like my real voice, and I used that, I would say, in between songs instead of just having like a brutal death metal monster voice and then talking in whatever accent you come from in between songs, like regular speaking voice. Mine was always kind of like like that, and nobody else really did that at the time, and that could have freaked some people out too. I don't know.
I mean, I think when anybody's real, it freaks people out because we live surrounded by a facade amongst everything. So,
That's so true.
yeah. Um, but when it comes to the lyrics that are demonstrated in Profanatica too, have you always preferred to have music before you came up with lyrics, or with your concept and your goals and your vision in a way, maybe like a lyrical idea helped dictate the direction of the sound?
Um, it's another tough one because it always comes together different. In this Crux Simplex we did 10 songs. They're based on, each song is based on the Stations of the Cross, the first 10. And it's like a bastardized version of that, where the first couple of tracks I'm kind of singing, taking the lyric idea from Jesus' perspective rather than my own. And then I slowly go on uh, to take all the, like the Romans perspective and the people that crucified him, and then finally my perspective, like a kind of a storytelling. Which, if you didn't know that what I just explained, you would never really get it because it's not really a concept album, although we did choose that concept for this.
I think there's a there's a difference between an album being conceptual and an album being a concept album. I think your work is very conceptual, as in there is a lot of storytelling to be had with it. But I wouldn't consider it a concept album because, like what you said earlier, you could listen to the music almost in any order. It's not like you're going to get lost in a narrative.
True. Okay, fair enough. So the other thing is that this time when we did it, we did the music first. I had ideas for the lyrics, but I took extra special time and care into making everything fit properly. That's why this one sounds a little more like black death metal from like a songwriting approach. And it's, my screams are kind of long, but it's broken down into syllables. So everything has to fit. This took a year for us to write because we took our time with it, but it came together easy. And there was nothing forced.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound forced, but it's funny you mentioned that because I do feel like with this new album that it is a very rhythm-driven album, and being both a drummer and a vocalist and a lyricist, do you vocally think in a rhythmic sense as well? Or do you almost look at them as two separate instruments or almost two separate forms of expression even?
God. Let me think. This time I did. So we wanted the guitar riffs to be evil and haunting like a black death metal, but what I did this time that was a little different is I sang during the parts that I normally would. In the past, I would let riffs breathe as not to waste them. So I would sing over like the ring outs or something not so interesting. This time I did vocals like where I wanted them to, in a totally different spot than I would have. If you listen to the older stuff, you only have to listen to a couple songs and then you'll be able to tell, oh, he's coming in here with something, or this is where they're going to all come in together. This one was a little bit different because there was more lyrics in this one than in the past.
And do you almost look at being a vocalist and a drummer in a way? It's kind of a similar question that I asked before, but do you express a similar side of yourself on a lyrical stance as you do on a rhythmic stance behind the kit, or is there like maybe just one instrument express a side that the other one can't really do?
Well, probably keep them separate and then together when we play live. So I would say yes.
And when it comes to also going back to like the lyrical stance, because you mentioned like there's some parts where you're talking about it from Jesus's perspective, but you're talking about it from your own perspective. So does it maybe feel like, depending on what perspective it's coming from, it it's like a different energy in a way, or it resonates with you differently?
It could. You see, you're asking me good questions, and I'm so not used to it.
Oh, I appreciate
So
it.
that's why I'm like pausing. Um, it kind of depends. I don't really think about it. It just kind of comes out, so it's hard for me to say. Somebody would have to be like watching me work.
I would love to
But
see a Profanatica documentary.
a lot of people would. But I think that so there are some songs like "Unto Us He Is Born," which is one of my favorites, where the lyrics are just the title, and that's us being like, "Fuck you, we could do whatever we want. We will do whatever we want." This Crux Simplex recording is more putting more ideas in, if you will, instead of just having it kind of. It still is stripped down.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people ask me about old incantation, and the music comes from the same source. It's basically the same thing. We're just doing a more stripped down version of what they did.
Well,
Like more of a simple.
Well, I also see a lot of your own identity within it too. I mean, yes, I definitely see a lot of incantation and how the fans of Immolation would appreciate you, and how the fans of like Mayhem or Emperor could appreciate you. But one thing that I think is really fascinating about your concept and everything is that there is a lot of thought behind it. Yet we've seen a lot of anti-Christianity and blasphemistic lyrics, and a lot of "fuck you" attitude. But there have been times where I criticize it because it says "fuck you," but there's nothing behind the middle finger that like really backs it up. But you have a certain ideology behind it, which I think is what really was this whole idea. And sorry to make this question so long, but was like the idea of expressing this, did this come from your own personal experience in a way, or was it almost like research involved behind it, and it's not so much rooted in experience as more or less an escapism?
Um, More experience and plus research. So I had a religious upbringing, like a lot of people have. Like if you ask any death or black metal or punk people what they think about religion, most of them are going to be like, "Fuck that shit."
Yeah.
But they spend very little time on the subject, and maybe they're singing about like black magic or what have you. But that subject of religion being like purely it's just a business, and it's a booming business. That information fascinated me. What techniques do they use to get people to follow? And it's really like the ultimate thing if you think about it. Like, follow us now and you'll have like life forever afterwards.
Yeah.
There's no way to disprove that.
It sounds like every insurance lawyer I've spoken to.
Yeah, it really is. It's a hell of a force to be reckoned with. But
Yeah.
this, I also don't like double standards or like playing favorites. I think things kind of like are what they are. So this concept was like it was. I don't want to do this. I kind of have to do this now at this point.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you were saying?
No, I just think that people they have this kind of like anti-religious feelings towards the same thing I have feelings towards, but their concepts are they're kind of elusive, where ours are just like clear, bold, final decisions.
I feel like what's fascinating is because when we see like a lot, I've always thought that when you have like a punk band that's fighting against the system, whether it would be fighting against capitalism or any sort of form of oppression or anything like that, that has like, I feel like, its own methodology behind it. And when you take bands that are very blasphemous, as we see in black metal, I feel like that's a different energy. But what I found unique is mentioning the religion as a business standpoint. You have obviously the blasphemy behind it, but also like the anti-corporatism that we see in punk that's going into it. It's almost like you are giving the anti-corporatism message to a god rather than like a business,
Yeah, for sure. And that just kind of happened naturally. Like it just is part of it, I would say.
But To when you have like darkness and this agony and this anger as a as a means of creative energy, it's obviously very cathartic and it means as a great source of inspiration. But I always thought that sometimes artists can become victimized by their own product and that the darkness can in a way consume them. So has the songwriting process been just as deteriorating as it can be cathartic?
Uh, so I'm pretty good at like separating my normal life from this. And if I start to get like a little bit burnt out, I'll step away. But as far as ideas go, even though let's say nothing's happening, there's a long lull in between shows or tours, and there's an even longer lull in between recording, I'm still constantly every day jotting down ideas.
Do ideas come out of nowhere in a way, or do you almost like seek out the inspiration?
It's almost impossible for me the way I work to seek it out, but they come from everywhere. And I'll tell you a little secret that if I write down an idea, as crazy as it is, if I go back to it months later, I'm always surprised at how good it is. I'm never like, oh, this was kind of stupid. I wonder what I was thinking.
I, I
Uh,
as an artist, and every other artist is probably envying that feeling right now.
yeah, because I've been there, trust me. But I'm just, when I reread some of my old notes, I'm like, these are fucking great. I have to use this kind of thing. And there's also our lyrics and our concept are, there's a really fine line that I work where it's really fucking stupid on a borderline genius. And it's like right there on the edge where just when you think we're gonna like kind of outgrow and mature a little bit, we'll throw in something about like semen or use the word fuck properly just to not to be a jerk and keep people on their toes. It's just, again, it's like a natural thing. It just comes out. And I think that's, I will say that my arranging is different than other people's arranging. How the, like, if you gave somebody, here's the concept for a song, these are the lyrics, but they're out of order. You piece together the patterns. Mine's going to come out pretty close every time, pretty much the same.
Well, I've always said that the sound of Profanatica is the sound of misanthropy. That's just the
Okay.
ultimate, like, or misanthropy. I'm very dyslexic,
Yeah.
so, but like,
Thanks. That's great.
but like, I feel like it is the soundtrack to that. But it's funny that you mentioned that too, because you say that you don't seek it out, but it comes from everywhere. But if it comes from and I sort of asked this a little bit before too, but when it's coming from an internal source versus an external source, is your art to approaching that inspiration a little bit different?
The same. I'll just take whatever ideas I could kind of take, however it comes in. Um,
You're
Most of them are external in terms of like words or like lyrics. Uh, and so I guess I got pretty good about looking for inspiration
yeah.
because I definitely, every artist, no matter what they do or how good or bad they are, has had trouble like just looking at a blank canvas. It's pretty intimidating.
Yeah, it very much is.
And like overthinking shit. So as it comes in, I got good at like keeping an open mind, and believe it or not, even though I'm like closed minded, I'm pretty coachable in terms of what I'll accept and what I won't. In terms of like ideas, if I'm watching a movie or like a documentary or reading,
Yeah. Well,
I'm pretty open to that. And plus, um, there's some other like kind of secret techniques that I'll use if I'm hitting a little bit of a dry spell.
but if you're working on something for a long period of time, like you mentioned, it took a year to record some of the stuff off of Crux Simplex. So, When you work on something for a long period of time, though, does this sort of make it a little bit more difficult to maintain that emotion or the initial spark of the idea? Do you prefer to feel the same way when you finish something as you do when you start it?
Uh, Wait, what do you mean?
Like,
Like,
is it harder to keep the idea fresh the longer you're working on it?
no, no, because I know that nobody's heard it. And I'm kind of always excited about wait till this part, wait till they hear this change to this change. And when I say they, it could be just a few close friends or people's opinions that I trust. It's nobody in particular, just maybe like a small group. So I'm always looking at there's a small group of rabid Profanatica fans. What are they going to think when they hear this? Like, did it fall short? What are the people's opinions that I trust?
Yeah.
Um, and then there's part two of that is I'll picture them saying, "You can't do that. There's no rhyme or reason to that." In which case I'll say, "Yes, now we're going to do it twice as hard,"
You let
kind of thing.
you led me perfectly into the next question I wanted to ask you because in the end, and this is the final part about the concept part with Profanatica, but could in the end, art is open to interpretation, and people resonate with it on a different level. Sometimes they use the blasphemistic nature as a means of hating something else that's in reality even. But when people interpret your music, and you have these great dedicated Profanatica fans, when they give you either constructive advice or you seek out or they take inspiration from your work, does that bring another layer of meaning to Profanatica's material in a way, or do you still
It
feel?
does. It does. So one of my heroes, of course, was Stanley Kubrick, and he refused to answer any questions about like what is this part about. People would try to get information out of him, and he would just be like, "It's highly subjective. I don't want to ruin the experience for the viewer." Even though people like me were like, "I kind of don't get that. I need to know from him what he meant by it." Um, I think if somebody creates their own vision of what it's supposed to mean, it's way more powerful than something I could ever come up with.
And then the next question part I have is with regards to your drumming, because first off, a lot of people I've spoken to a lot of drummers about this, and a lot of people assume because drums are a very rhythmic driven instrument and it's not really driven by melody that there's not much emotion behind the kit. But I think that's I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I see drummers putting all their emotion behind their kit, and I think it's fair to assume that with Profanatica, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know who said it's not musical.
People who know shit about music.
Yeah, I would say. Uh, I'll say that I got my own style, which a lot of people, like I said before, like a lot of the young kids coming up have great hands and great feet, and a lot of them are tappers. I like to try to pound, but I use it like as a weapon. And so the way I look at it is they answer to me, the drums, like whatever I want. There's also there's several layers of things happening. So if you hear me do or say something, there's like five other applications to that at least. So I mean, I don't know. These people must not know anything if they said that.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I'm just doing kind of again what comes naturally. There's been times where I'm like watching videos of myself playing, and seeing like photos of me playing, and I use like these marching mallets. I did a small video on it. I also did like I'll flip them around right before our set starts live, and then in certain portions of each song, there's no thinking involved. It's all like free flow, so I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll see myself choked way up on the stick and thinking like, what the hell was I doing choked up that far? Like I'm literally grabbing the middle of the stick, and it's just to have like more control for a certain part. So there's a lot of stuff happening. We're working overtime to create the simplest pounding Black Death we can.
And I think you succeed with that. And that's an amazing slogan right there. Can you put that on your next T-shirt, please?
I should, or if you could just maybe put it down in the corner.
Yeah, I'll definitely.
Actually, it didn't come from me. It came from some rock magazine from Greece when we played there. Some guy came and said that I never saw another band work so hard to create that simple, stripped down style.
I mean,
another thing is it sounds very easy what we're doing, and to us it kind of is, but there's a lot of stuff going into it. And back to that pounding beat that I do, I love that beat. That's like my beat. That like kind of head to the side and just like forcing the hi-hat and the snare at the same time rather than the bass drum and the hi-hat where 98% of the drummers start. My beat is more like a pulling beat where theirs is a pushing beat.
mm-hmm.
And the sound guys are kind of shocked when they ask guitar, do you want kick drum? In the monitor, they're like, never, always snare, because the first hit is always the hi-hat and the snare.
Do you prefer to have like riffs and patterns and like, a song already present before you lay down your drum parts? Or have you ever had a whole drum pattern written and the band would write over that?
I had a couple of drum fill parts. So let's say I came up with a cool little beat. The way I would use it is be like, this isn't going to be just like a fill or like a segue into another part. I would use that as the majority of the song itself, like letting stuff breathe and giving it like full credit. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of other parts, it would just be kind of like a roll off fill or a slap off fill into another riff, whether another band would have vocals over it or not. So my decisions are way different than a lot of other people's on what to do with the stuff.
How do you know when you're finished with a song?
Well, this is probably going to sound uncool, but a lot of times I'll look up and say, what are we at? And somebody will say 45 seconds, mm-hmm. in which case I could be like, cool. Hey, let's just end it there.
At least you're honest about it.
Yeah, so the last couple of tours we did, we didn't fight, but I got a little argumentative because people are like, oh, we're clocking in at 38 minutes. Don't you think we better do 50? And I'm like, fuck no. It's 38 minutes. That's it. That's all I'm doing. And a lot of people are like, could you stretch it to 50? And I'm like, no, it just doesn't feel like natural to me. So when we're done with our set, we just throw the bass down, throw the guitar down, it feeds back, and we just leave, go in the back and take our shit off.
I love it. I love how, again, your songwriting process, and I know that you work overtime and you work really hard on this, but I love how explaining your music is as simple as the music too. So
cool.
I think that's awesome. How are we doing on time? You got time for a few more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the final portion of the interview, kind of do a little deep dive into some catalogs. First and foremost, what I'm curious about is because even though Profanatica has been around since 1990, the first Profanatica full-length album, Profanatas de Demonitia, and again, forgive my horrible pronunciation, yep. But is that considered the first Profanatica, or is the Weeping in Heaven EP that you released in 92 really considered to be the first offering of Profanatica?
The Weeping in Heaven first offering, for sure. You mean the split with Massacre?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the first one.
Okay. Is there a reason why that was chosen to be the first release as opposed to like a full-length album or a full-length solo EP?
I think it was time. Osmos put that out, and I think they asked us. He said, do you have enough? We didn't have enough for a full length at the time. and he wanted to kind of get something out. So we just did those, like, what was it, 4 songs for the split with Massacre.
Yeah.
And then we went back in to do the full length.
And another thing I wanted to ask you is too, because Profanatica is not your only project. You have Jehovah Backwards. That's all I'm going to be able to say it.
Yep.
I don't know if you pronounce it in any other way, but you've worked with Incantation before, and you worked with Toten as well with a great catalog. Is the mind frame or your mind frame or creative process different depending on the project, or is there a method behind the madness that kind of applies to everything?
There's a method that applies to everything, but what I'll do is once the concept is there, I try to like capture the soul of our concept into it the best way. But those methods will come out even if I don't want them to. Let's put it that way. So I could play and just I would definitely be able to do drums on like a thrash album or like just a regular heavy metal album. If somebody brought me in to do that, I'd be able to do that without making it sound like me. And one of my favorite drummers, of course, is Dave Lombardo, and he did it with Suicidal and the new Misfit stuff, where he wasn't Dave Lombardo from Slayer on drums. He was just like the Misfits drummer, and he used all of his skill and knowledge to capture what he was supposed to do for the Misfits or Suicidal, if that makes sense. Like, he didn't throw Slayer beats in there.
Yeah.
There was really no need. He was just that good that he could form to whatever he needed to.
If you have the chameleon technique, which is what I call it, the ability to camouflage in any other project, that's a talent all in itself.
I could do that, and nobody would know that it was me. But, you know, in any kind of music, except for like, I haven't developed like ultra fast double bass drums or anything like that. So I wouldn't be able to fill in for somebody like Niall.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wouldn't want to like say that I could either. It's just like not my thing.
Yeah.
I'm not like that style of a drummer, but if somebody needed me for something easy, I could definitely hide it.
Fair enough. And kind of one other, like, there's like an anniversary question I wanted to ask, because going back to, again, Jehovah Backwards, I don't know if you have a pronunciation for it, but
I just call it Have a Hedge.
Have a Hedge? Okay.
Yeah.
That's I like that name, Have a Hedge. That's actually pretty.
Yeah.
That's fun to say, Have a Hedge.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be saying that to myself like for my entire walk I'm doing after this. But this year marks 30 years of To Throne the Son of God, as well as the Unholy Darkness and Impurity EP. So I just want to know, with the formation of that project, being that stuff came out long before we got the debut full-length Profanatica album, what was your sort of creative mind frame 30 years ago, which is how old I'm going to be in less than a month? So
okay, so for that one, that 7-inch, it was I actually thought of I wanted to do it myself without relying on any guitar. So the guy at our studio said what we could do is sample guitar, down pitch it, add some like a continuous rumble underneath that, and you could actually play those notes very simply, like on a keyboard. So for that 7-inch, I did go in and record the drums and then played over it with the keyboard. That's how that was put together. But like some trivia that nobody knows about the To Throne the Son of God is I went into the studio, I did all the drums by myself without a click track, brought Brett in, who used to play on the Profanatica split, and he just pretty much played to me because we've been playing for a long time, so there was no there was barely even like 4 counts, I think. I just did it all from memory in my head, and he hit it, I want to say like in one take, and he might have got punched in 1 or 2 times. That's it. It's pretty like raw.
Wow, that's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. to think about it now with like, because I don't know, I don't like click tracks for me. I think it, like if I used it, it would suck all the soul out of our recording.
Yeah, and you.
But you'd be surprised that like everybody uses it,
Yeah.
like
Well,
pretty much everybody.
yeah. Well, with everybody using it, it becomes more and more easy to pick out the ones who don't use it, and I think that's
Yeah.
obvious in your case.
So I'm not thinking I'm cool. I'm not using a click track, but a lot of people have asked me to use it. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. It's like, I don't dig it. That little bit of speeding up is where that feeling comes from. That I'm like, fuck yes, this is happening. This is the shit that I like, and we're kind of going hard on this part or that part.
Awesome. That is fucking cool, and I appreciate that little inside knowledge. So,
Yeah.
before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for such an awesome conversation. Is there just anything else with Profanatica or Have a Hedge that you'd like to promote in terms of more music, new music coming out, or tours that are announced that you would like to plug?
Well, this weekend, we're doing Heavy Hell
Oh wow.
in Indiana with Mortician and Deceased. So that should be a good one. I think it's open air, if I'm not mistaken.
That's an awesome lineup, and that's all East Coast too, right? Isn't Deceased from New York, or could I be wrong?
I think they're from like the Virginia area, maybe.
East Coast, I count it.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Are you guys are from New York, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm calling right now from the center of Manhattan.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would just be about it. Thanks for the questions.
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you for the music. It definitely
Yeah.
provokes a lot of thought and plays artistic inspiration for me as well.
Thanks. Oh, one more thing. We are hitting, I think starting in November, we will be in New York. We're hitting like 18 more dates on the East Coast because we just finished our West Coast run.
Hell yeah. So I hope November I will be there. Count me in.
All right. Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Profanatica. Be sure to check out the brand new album, Crux Simplex, coming out this September. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.